It's also my privilege to welcome Graeme Martin, who's the General Manager of Spatial Vision. And Graeme works with a lot of local councils in Australia, but also will bring his perspective from global to local. Graeme, floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Zafar, and thank you very much to SSI for the opportunity to speak today at such an important event at this moment in time. I'm going to give you a personal perspective and then of a commercial business in Australia where we see climate change as an opportunity to assist our clients. "40 years ago, in my final year of university, I was assigned an essay topic, present a positive case for nuclear energy. Now, I would have liked to have argued the alternative. However, I went to the library, as we did then, and found out about the greenhouse effect and a new technology, heat pumps. Heat pumps would enable the electrification of the residential heating in North America. So zero carbon nuclear power could significantly replace the burning of carbon heavy fuel oil and address global warming." Now, that was my essay, and that sparked my pursuit of the science of global warming and a commitment to act on it ever since. Now, back then, information seemed to have more impact. However, at that time, climate knowledge was not widespread or generally understood. 40 years later, heat pumps are a ubiquitous technology for heating and cooling systems. You've got an aircon system, it'll be a heat pump. However, the debate about climate change, as we now call it, continues despite the accumulation of troves of scientific data. Data on weather extremes, unprecedented events, changing seasons, also data from forecasting models, some that have already played out and forecast to come for different carbon scenarios. Many people are overwhelmed by this array of information served up by the media and other parties. It remains a battle to convince many people of the scale of the crisis we face, despite all this information being available. So, as data-focused professionals, how do we cut through the noise? Well, it's about embedding the assets, people, biodiversity, livelihoods, and built infrastructure, the things we care about, into the picture to demonstrate the local impact and ultimately make data relevant. Let me explain. Last year, I was privileged to be trained as a climate reality leader by former Vice President Al Gore. The training highlighted extreme climatic events over the past 10 years and the people and environments impacted, as well as the opportunities for dealing with the crisis. As a geospatial engineer, I see that my role and that of the industry is to use our skills to transform the troves of available data to derive meaningful information to generate insight to people across many sectors. As geospatial professionals, our special power, if you like, is to put local context into global data. Turning data into relevant insight is our superpower. Here's how we do it at Spatial Vision. Our company comprises geospatial and IT engineers, perhaps like many here today. We are committed to enabling governments, business and NGOs with the tools, technology and expertise needed to address economic, social and environmental challenges, many of which today are climate related. Over the past 10 years, our company has been increasingly engaged by clients to help them to comprehend the dimensions of climate impact on their assets, communities and industries, and to understand the scale of adaptation or mitigation planning necessary to address that. In these projects, we utilise the latest IPC climate projection data as well as weather observations from the Australian Bureau of Meteorology to generate visual representations of the changes to our climate over the past 50 years and then the next 50 years forward. Let's look at a few examples. First of all, as you can imagine, heat waves are a major concern in Australia. A heat wave is defined as more than 3 days over 35 degrees Celsius. Local government has a duty of care towards its citizens and resources to support them. The 9 South East Councils of Melbourne making up SECA, the South East Councils Climate Change Alliance, wanted guidance on heat waves on their region and their vulnerable communities. Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of information to draw from, but our approach to these types of projects is to firstly source authoritative data to determine the climate baseline and the relevant projections for climate and events such as heat waves. Then in this case, we worked with representatives of council service areas to decide the criteria for assessing the most vulnerable communities, infrastructure and assets to create a heatwave vulnerability profile. Now, as you can see, for this particular region of Melbourne and southeast Victoria in Australia, weather observation data already shows that the frequency of heat waves over the past 40 years has doubled. And they're very likely to triple again over the next 10 years, and then, depending on the carbon emission trajectory, continue to increase. So the question becomes, who will be most impacted? In all local government areas, there are vulnerable communities. In this project, we created a heatwave vulnerability profile for each local government based on projected demographics for young children and the senior population. This map represents vulnerable communities in 2021. The information here is used by council to focus their services to pre-equip and support these communities during heat waves. It also helped them to plan utilisation of cooling places such as public libraries and community centres. We can then see the projected frequency of heat waves for the local geography of each council. You can see in these two images here, 2030 and 2050, that the coastal sea breeze influence means that the areas away from the coast are more impacted, especially by 2050. These forecasts are used to guide future investment in open space, infrastructure and service provision. Green open space can bring down local temperatures. Libraries and community centres can operate as cooling centres. Public transport needs to be designed to cater for heat, as they're often used by the elderly, and assets should be designed for heat tolerance. This is how this information is used. So let's look at another example, this time for a catchment management authority that wanted to increase the capacity of landholders, community and local government to adapt to changes in regional climatic conditions. The authority is looking for a way to engage these groups in informed discussions. So Spatial Vision was contracted and collaboratively designed and provisioned a public spatial tool to help guide discussions about climate adaptation pathways. Again, we sourced authoritative weather observations for the region to understand the level of existing changes and to establish a baseline, then the most recent IPC projections adapted for the region. Importantly, we worked with representatives of different agricultural production types, local government and communities, to define the parameters most relevant to each focus area so that we could design tools specific to each. As we can see on screen here, the various Explorer tools enabled users to select a range of climate variables to visualise location history and projections relevant in their context. So as a result of this project, more than 2,000 land managers have been subsequently been engaged to examine how they can adapt their businesses to counter the impacts of climate change with Spatial Vision, its work providing the foundation. Our client says without it, the conversation would have sunk. But as a result of the tool, some farmers will not only avoid bankruptcy, but will survive for generations to come. This is the kind of impact that meaningful, relevant data has on communities and can truly make a difference. I'm very fortunate to be working for a company that values making a difference, with other colleagues who are truly committed to taking positive action on the climate crisis and empowering clients and communities to address their climate change challenges. So as geospatial professionals, we're uniquely placed to bring together various data and place it into a local context to inform people's understanding and plan to address our changing climate and the impact on people, livelihoods, biodiversity, physical assets, and infrastructure. So let's use our superpower to make climate data meaningful and relevant. Thank you.
Graeme, I think it's quite good from Graeme's talk that we saw the maps, but also the temporal aspects, 50 years past projections, 50 years past data and 50 years future data to help do that projection scenarios, but also small companies can make big impacts. Corporates are taking that action. And I think we'll have some questions from Graeme's presentation from the audience shortly.